A little bit more about that. Joining me this evening, Sangita Reddy from FICCI. Sangita, hi, good evening. Good to have you on the show. And Sangita, that's the thing, right? Most states are taking a self-assessment and realizing that they need to extend the lockdown. It seems like that is the need of the hour. And I think, sooner than later, we will hear out from the Prime Minister himself as well on what's to be done with the national lockdown.
So clearly, it was expected, the progression of the disease or the pandemic continues and the number of cases are growing every day. However, if we look at India's numbers, our numbers are really appearing like India is coming out relatively unscathed. And this is the power of the early lockdown, the power of the social distancing, and the fact that we sealed our borders very early. I think that taking a holistic view of the scenario, there are many states who are experiencing the hotspots, worried about the potential impact and the spread, and therefore appropriately keeping people's interest in mind, they are saying, let's extend the lockdown. I believe that the Prime Minister's statement, where he said that Jaan bhi aur jahan bhi. So now we will see the scenario of a calibrated, slow but very careful release. They had already opened the roadways to essential products. I think the movement is very important. In all meetings, we have emphasized, number one, the importance of opening up the agri sector, because you have the kharif crop coming up, you have the mangoes that need harvesting in the northeast, there's tea. I believe the first flush of tea, almost 2,000 crores of tea, has been unable to be harvested and therefore lost. So it's very important to now plan, calibrate, and very strategically do an opening up and lifting. But the Prime Minister, his advisors have the complete data, and any announcements they make are something that we should all respect and understand in the interest of the country. It's a difficult decision, and this calibration of life and livelihood is really the plan which I think we are going to see emerging slowly over the next 2 to 3 weeks. The Prime Minister is very, very aware of the loss of jobs. Almost 50 million jobs have been lost. The fact that the MSMEs are in significant distress, and almost 100 million people work in the MSME sector, and these are small businesses. It's almost about 30% of our GDP. So whether it's people who make small parts for the auto sector, or they're making the little drainage pipe which goes into your air cooler, and now with the summer season coming up, all these are going to become essential products. So there's a whole series of things which step by step,
absolutely.
I think,
And on that subject, Sangita, I want to just come to you for a more detailed list on this, because as per our understanding, both industry bodies, that is FICCI as well as CII, have sent a long list of recommendations, part of which you already highlighted. But, highlight for us in detail, because I believe that part of the recommendations were also, things like tax deferment, including GST without any penalties, extension of a loan moratorium to 6 months, etc., to try and really, ease and buffer up the hit that the economy is going to take.
So thank you for this opportunity to share. I think we spoke with economists, with industrialists, with agriculturists, but we spoke with a wide range of people to really come out with a package which I think was in the interest of the nation. And we divided this package actually into a series of subheads. The first one, and I want to emphasize this, all of us are in agreement that this is a disaster. This is a pandemic. So our first category actually was disaster relief. It's not a package, it's not a stimulus. The first one was disaster relief to the most vulnerable. And we strongly stated that we need to put more money in the people's hand. We acknowledge and appreciate the first wave of this and believe there's a need to do further. So there was about 2 lakh crores in that first package, which was relief to the most vulnerable. The second level of things which we spoke about was really the badly affected sectors like hospitality, aviation, etc., and some special acknowledgement, and the MSMEs, which I think are going to be the biggest hit. And like I said, tomorrow, even 2 weeks later, when we start opening up the lockdown, they will not have money to buy raw material, and they won't be able, their April salaries is going to be a question for a lot of people. So I think it's very important for us to that segment. The next aspect, after we spoke about the relief to the vulnerable and then the relief to the MSME and the vulnerable the sectors which have been most hit, was a whole concept of business continuity. Because as the country is in this demand, we have to also rev up the supply side of the scenario. So in the supply side, our first point was really that you need to stop all interest rates and do what is being called a stop the clock. And Singapore, Germany, many countries have done that. So for that period or longer, stop interest payments. The first would be to back them, and for some companies, maybe even to do some partial favors, because keeping businesses alive is important. And it's important for productivity, for the economy, and for jobs. So that became the next category. The other thing we spoke about is liquidity. I think it was a very fair ask that we put forward, and it was very simply to say there is already 2.5 lakh crores pending with the government under various heads, whether it's payments to state governments, whether it's refunds for taxes, income tax, GST, all these, if those GST credits, if that can be done, that is 2.5 lakh crores, which anyway has to be paid by the government at some point of time. If that is done now quickly, it would create the effective liquidity into the country. The next one, which I think is most important, today we spoke with Sadhguru Jaggi Vasudev, and that was the whole aspect on healthcare. And what he said is, today, I hope the country is acknowledging that healthcare people are worthy of worship. It's important for us to strengthen that sector, to acknowledge the fact that whether it's the small hospitals or the nursing homes or even the large ones, they've lost their income. They have to retain their employees. This is not the time to let them go. And they have to start treating a new category of people, which is much more expensive because of the PPE cost, because of the cost of various inputs like ventilators, which they were not prepared for. So we need packages for the healthcare sector. And the final category, since we were planning and thinking, we also said everything should not be doom and gloom. Let's keep our economy strong with these packages, and let's start preparing for the future. The global supply chain is getting disrupted. This is a time for India to look at what we can do. How can we strengthen manufacturing clusters and participate in the global supply chain? As we're saving our agri sector, can we strengthen it further and say that we can now become one of the food suppliers for the world? For that, we need cold storage, we need processing, we need standards, we need a whole lot of things. This is the perfect time to bring the relief to the farmers in the form not just of one-off payments, but in addition to that, to do futuristic infrastructure strengthening. Similarly, we also spoke significantly about construction, which is the country's second largest employer, about roads and about low-cost housing. And finally, my favorite subject next to healthcare is the whole aspect of innovation and industries of the future and research. So we put a small fund in there, which I think will give us disproportionate returns to the country on aiming on the industries of the future, which is IT, which is robotics, which is innovation and science. India should be upfront in the race to create that vaccine. Our pharma sector is doing so well today. India is in a position of pride because our Prime Minister is being asked, please allow your Indian pharmaceutical companies to supply. Let's strengthen our pharma sector even further. So this is the whole range of package, and I really would like to highlight that we tried to focus on every sector. We tried to be developmental in thought, look at the immediate term as well as the medium and long term. And at the end of the day, if all these are implemented, which I'm very confident and sure that many of them will be, India should emerge from this crisis, which right now is a significant crisis. We should emerge victorious, we should recover, we should become an example for the world. And as we brace ourselves for the slowing of the economy, let us keep the light at the end of the tunnel, that the right relief packages will be done, the right stimulus packages will be done, and in a 12 to 24-month period, India will emerge very strong.
Sure. And instrumental to that, Sangita, would also be increasing the testing that we are doing. Help us understand, because you've got your ears to the ground, whether testing has increased by the day or not.
So honestly, there is nothing, testing is extremely important. I can't say it any other way. Every single authority has said that. ICMR and all the labs, the government labs in the country, recognize that and they stepped up. Parallelly, ICMR said we need the private sector to come in, and almost 70 labs were accredited. Now, all these labs, big and small, who had the NABL accreditation for PCR testing of H1N1, which is the closest equivalent to COVID, were accredited to do this. And then based on the cost price of the kit, the cost price of the PPE, a package was much negotiated by the government and finally agreed by the private sector that they would be able to either charge the patient. And so the private sector started ramping up in the testing. And in some cases, there were some which were given free. There were some which were in talks with government saying we will support government capability and government would pay. All these formulas were emerging. But now I think there's a kind of a lack of clarity on this subject. We're waiting for the Supreme Court to come out with a new direction. For now, they're saying that all testing should be free. I don't think that the private healthcare sector, which is already suffering a significant shock, can go ahead and do free testing entirely. And therefore, it's very important to have this clarity. But suffice to say that if private sector completely, ramps up, I think they have the capacity to do over 50,000 tests per day, and this will significantly increase the capacity of the country. The rapid test kits which ICMR has imported will also increase the capacity of the country. And to date, I think over 1.2 lakh tests have been done, and all the government labs are doing a tremendous job. But this is a time for us to work together. This is about public-private participation. This is about civil society and everyone understanding that we're waging a war and working together for the good of the nation. I hope we can find that framework of cooperation, collaboration, and joint endeavor to fight this war.
Yeah, and you're exactly voicing the same thoughts. I was chatting with Kiran Mazumdar-Shaw of Biocon just an hour back, and she exactly said the same thing, that, the Supreme Court coming out and saying that, private labs should undertake these tests free of cost. She said, without understanding that there are a lot of moving parts and equations to this entire thing. So absolutely right in that case. But do you really think, Sangita, that there could be a middle path? Because, this is critical. This is not something that you can push back. It's not just another case that can take number of years to get solved. We need to get to a conclusion right away and right now, because, private labs will have to test. If the numbers are increasing the way they are, if we need to try and restrict the pandemic, we will have to up the testing, and private labs will have to pitch in.
So you're absolutely right. It is very important to contain the pandemic by quickly diagnosing, isolating, and also the other thing is to identify early so that we can treat them when they're relatively well. If you wait till they get into the full-blown case, then they very quickly deteriorate, and that's where our lack of ventilators will come into play. But coming back to your question on what is the methodology, I think it's very clear private lab has to support the initiative of the government. We have to come out. In terms of the payment mechanism, I think the government is spending a similar amount of money when they're doing the testing themselves. So either government should pay. There can be a scenario where the people who can afford it can pay. The third scenario is that insurance companies who for now don't cover outpatient could be asked to step up because of the crisis. And finally, I think, whether it's the government paying or people paying or insurance paying, and maybe to some degree, say 10%, even the labs could give subsidized or give it free. But let's just say, let's find a way and move forward. And the solution should reflect the demography of the country, the need of the country, and this concept of all working together. So I'm very certain that we can work together and find a solution. And I believe the Supreme Court was not appropriately briefed. Otherwise, knowing the need to do this testing, I don't think that verdict would have come out. Maybe it was, a very not completely brief. And we really await a positive and a collaborative decision very quickly.
Okay, on that positive and hopeful note, Sangita, glad that you could take time out and speak with us today. Thank you so much for joining in.
It is a pleasure, and I just want to say that we're all in this together. And on behalf of FICCI as well as Apollo Hospital, we're doing everything we can to keep people safe, to open up every channel, to work with ventilator manufacturers, to test, to help. We're really doing everything we can. The last one I really want to say is that we have this initiative called Stay I, which is an isolation room. So hotel rooms have been converted to isolation rooms, and we put telemedicine on top. This is to decongest the hospital as well as to pick up a patient when they're deteriorating, so they move into the hospital at the right time. And realizing the fact that individuals who are staying in homes where 4 or 5 people are in one room, or many people are sharing a bathroom, are not appropriately isolated. So I request people to please feel free to use this facility. Some of it is covered by CSR from companies like HUL, Deutsche Bank, and SBI. So we also have free options available. Apollo is giving all the telemedicine services free. So, this is something which I request people to use the facility so that we can contain the spread. And thank you for this time. It was very good talking to you.
I'm really glad that... Same here. Thank you so much for taking the time out, Sangita.